early access games are something that I usually try to avoid, but when I saw Chernobylite, I knew that I had to make an exception this time. If you watched my previous videos, you know that I'm a huge fan of the Stalker franchise, so of course, something like a story-driven FPS set in Chernobyl's exclusion zone instantly got my attention. But after a brief playthrough of the first alpha version back in 2019, I've decided to leave it until the final release. Even though Chernobylite indeed looked like something right up my alley, it was also clear that developers still had a lot of work to do. Recently, the game version finally reached the 1.0 number, so now I'm going to take a quick look at the progress that the Farm 51 made in the past 2 years. As expected, compared to the first alpha version of Chernobylite, the performance was noticeably improved on the release. After looking back at the benchmark results that I got in 2019, the average framerate in the final version was boosted by around 20%. Sadly, that is still not quite enough to achieve 60 FPS average figures at 4K resolution with maxed out graphics on my hardware. Of course, I didn't really plan to play it like that and run a test at 4K Ultra preset only to give you a perspective on performance in this game. It looks like Chernobylite is GPU heavy, so if you target 1080p, you'll probably be able to easily achieve a comfortable 60 plus average FPS even with the best graphics quality. Lowering down options like shadows and draw distance can provide an additional 10-20% performance boost, but personally I don't recommend going below high settings because the medium quality preset turns Chernobylite into a jittery mess. Instead, I would suggest enabling DLSS or FSR, because these options are a great way to get a significant performance increase. To be honest, this is my first time I've ever used FSR, and I'm very impressed with the results that you can achieve with this tech. Enabling this option literally doubled the average frame rate in my case, while the visual difference was barely noticeable in motion. Sadly, I couldn't test DLSS performance because it works only on RTX cards, and with the current prices I definitely won't be able to afford a new fancy GPU anytime soon. Well, according to Nvidia's own comparison, it looks like DLSS performs more or less the same as FSR. It's interesting to note that, judging by that official video, my GTX 1080 Ti has the same performance as RTX 3080 in this game, which is rather strange, isn't it? Anyway, after running a few more tests, I've decided that the most optimal choice in my case was to play at my native 1440p resolution with the high quality preset and enabled FSR. Unless you try to target a rock-solid 144 FPS average, I doubt that you'll be disappointed with the performance in this game. It's not ideal, but I can forgive many things for such an incredible 3D scanned environment that is featured in Chernobylite. This is exactly what I was looking for as a Stalker fan. The atmosphere in this game is slightly different, but it would still instantly hook anyone who ever visited the Chernobyl exclusion zone before. The levels in Chernobylite are incredibly detailed, though sadly it doesn't look like the result of places to explore. If I understand it right, this game has only 5 free roam locations that are rather modest in size. When I was reading in the pre-release roadmap about the planned central part of the Pripyat, I was expecting to see at least a proper district with a lot of interiors. But apparently it was literally just the central square with a Ferris wheel and a few other iconic landmarks, which is not comparable to what we had in Stalker Call of Pripyat. And considering that beating Chernobylite is supposed to take around 25 hours, it might as well mean that I'll have to revisit those 5 levels over and over again, which doesn't sound that exciting on paper. To be fair, I most probably haven't unlocked every available gameplay mechanic yet, so I hope that my first impressions would be wrong.
3.6. Not great, not terrible. Chin up. We're safe for another hour or so, alright?
From what I saw during the first few hours of my playthrough, the core gameplay loop of Chernobylite is heavily focused on the base building and other survival aspects. At the beginning of a new in-game day, you assign tasks to your companions and pick the location you would explore on your own. Most of the time, you'll just walk around the level and collect all sorts of garbage which you can use to craft something useful. The resources are barely visible in such a detailed environment, so you'll have to constantly use a so-called environmental analyzer to highlight the available loot in the area. And to be honest, that process becomes old quite fast because it doesn't provide any real challenge. The only exception is a few resource status that can be reached only with specific tools that you can craft. There are also clues and special events hidden around every level, but finding them won't require a lot of effort since they are always marked on the map. As for the combat, it looks like it's not the main focus of Chernobylite either. So far, the only hostile creatures that I've encountered in the zone were mercenaries that were patrolling a few spots on the level. There are supposed to be a bunch of mutants as well, but I didn't have the pleasure to meet them outside of the tutorial yet. The AI doesn't seem to be very smart, and since killing enemies damages your mental health, it's better to just sneak past the threat in most cases. Chernobylite also has a rudimentary leveling system. For each of your actions, you slowly accumulate experience and acquire a skill point every time you level up. Once you're done with the current mission, you can teleport back to the base where you can resupply the ammo and consumables, manage the food rations between the team members, and prepare for the next day. As you can see, despite the visual similarities with the Stalker games, Chernobylite is distinctively different gameplay-wise. It's important to keep that in mind before you decide to buy it, because this game might not be something that you'll enjoy playing. After looking at those visuals, it's easy to forget that this is not some AAA game and set your expectations too high. But even though I still have my doubts that Chernobylite would be fun to play for almost 25 hours, a good narrative can make up for the repetitiveness of its core gameplay loop. The investigation that you are doing by looking for clues around the zone somewhat reminds me of the first concept of Stalker: Oblivion Lost, just without the open world. Developers also claim that Chernobylite has a branching storyline that makes each new playthrough unique, and there are indeed a few moments when the game allows you to make a binary choice. But I have yet to see the outcomes of my decisions, so it all depends on how impactful those choices would be. And that's why I'm still not sure if I can recommend Chernobylite to anyone. It has a great atmosphere and intriguing storyline, but also potentially tedious gameplay that might hurt the whole experience. This is one of those cases when a few hours is not enough to properly judge the game. Well, I hope that this short preview at least gave you an idea of what to expect from Chernobylite in terms of the gameplay and performance. And if survival elements are not a big issue in your eyes, I guess you can give this game a chance when it will go on sale with a good discount. I definitely plan to beat Chernobylite and try to make a full review on it once I free up my schedule a little bit, so be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more.